Let's be real. For millions of parents, the last few years have felt like one gigantic, chaotic experiment, right? The line between a conference call and a coloring book, a deadline and dinner time, it just completely vanished. So, how did parents even survive when their work lives and their family lives suddenly collided under the exact same roof? We're going to dive into the strategies, the mindset shifts that help them not just get by, but actually build a whole new kind of resilience.
I mean, this quote from a working mom just hits home, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that impossible feeling so many of us had. You're being pulled in two different directions at the exact same time, and you feel like you're failing at your job and at being a parent. It was just this constant, exhausting tightrope walk with absolutely no safety net.
Because the fact is, the old rulebook got thrown right out the window. That daily commute that used to create a clear separation between work life and home life, gone. The physical office space, vanished. All of a sudden, we were all forced to write a new set of rules on the fly, trying to figure out how work and family could possibly coexist in the same space at the same time. So to really get a handle on the solutions people came up with, first, we've got to define the problem. What is actually happening to us psychologically when these two huge parts of our lives just bleed into one another?
Well, it turns out researchers have a name for this exact feeling. It's called work-family conflict. And look, this is way more than just being busy. It's a fundamental clash. Think about it. The resources you pour into your job, your time, your mental energy, your focus, those are the exact same resources you need for your family. It becomes a zero-sum game that just leaves you feeling completely and totally drained.
And, this wasn't some niche problem affecting a few people. Oh no, this conflict went mainstream, and it went mainstream fast. At the peak of it all, a staggering 71% of employed adults in the US were working from home. This wasn't a gradual shift, it was an overnight tidal wave that threw millions of families right into the deep end of work-family conflict. Now, here's what's so important to understand. This stress wasn't felt equally by everyone. The research is really clear that while pretty much all parents were struggling, those who were facing additional challenges, like parents of kids with neurodevelopmental disorders, they experienced way higher levels of stress. This just goes to show for so many people, this was a critical issue of well-being, not just some minor inconvenience. Okay, so you're faced with this massive, unprecedented challenge. How do people adapt? Well, the first and most fundamental changes weren't about new schedules or fancy home office setups. Nope, they were internal. It all started with a really powerful shift in mindset. The very first major shift wasn't about time management, it was about soul searching. All that chaos actually forced a moment of clarity for a lot of parents. It led to this profound reevaluation of what truly mattered and what their absolute non-negotiables were. And this quote from Victoria, wow, it just says it all. Before, so much of her identity and her sense of worth was tied to her career, but the pandemic completely flipped the script. For her and for so many others, it was this huge paradigm shift. The old saying, you work to live, not live to work, suddenly became very, very real. Family moved from the back burner to the absolute front and center. The second crucial mental shift was all about ditching this myth of being the ideal worker and just embracing reality. That meant getting crystal clear about what was actually possible in a day and then communicating those new expectations to everyone, your coworkers, your boss, and your partner. And you could see this mindset translate directly into action. Teams developed these new little digital languages, like just typing night in a chat. It was a simple way to say, hey, I'm logging off, don't expect a reply. People started unapologetically blocking off school pickup time on shared work calendars. And at home, couples started holding Sunday night meetings to map out the week just to make sure everybody was on the same page. Okay, so once that new mindset was in place, parents could start building practical, external strategies. They literally had to physically and digitally rebuild the walls between work and home that had been completely torn down. And it turns out there were 4 really effective tactics they used. These 4 strategies basically became the pillars of the new work-from-home survival guide. They address the digital, the time-based, the physical, and the social boundaries that are all absolutely essential for keeping your sanity. So let's break each one down. First up, and this one is huge, you have to create a digital barrier. The easiest way for work to invade your personal life is right through your phone or your laptop.
The parents who really succeeded at this were super disciplined. They'd physically leave their work laptop in the office space, they'd turn off all work notifications at 5 p.m. sharp, and they'd actively announce on team chats, signing off for the day. All right, number 2, stick to a schedule. When your 30-minute car commute disappears, you have to create a time-based commute instead. This meant being really strict about your 9 to 5 or whatever your hours were. The key was to reclaim the time you saved from commuting for your family or for yourself instead of just letting it get eaten up by more work. This next one is an absolute game changer. You need a space that signals work. Even if it's just a corner of a room or a closet you cleaned out, having that dedicated spot creates a powerful psychological boundary. Walking from the kitchen to that corner in the morning becomes your new commute, and at the end of the day, you can physically walk away from the office and leave the work behind. And finally, for those lucky enough to have an office with an actual door, man, that door became the ultimate boundary tool. A closed door was the universal, nonverbal signal for, I'm in a meeting, or Dad's trying to focus. It's a simple cue that the whole family can understand and respect, and it was absolutely critical for carving out moments of uninterrupted time. Now, it is so important to understand that this whole experience was not the same for everybody. When you really dig into the data, a very clear pattern emerges. Mothers and fathers navigated this new reality, and they used these strategies in very different ways. To understand why, you have to look at where things stood before the world turned upside down. Before the pandemic, the division of labor at home was, frankly, often unequal. Mothers typically handled the daily routine stuff, the cooking, the cleaning, and they carried what's called the mental load of managing the household. Fathers were more likely to handle non-routine jobs, and interestingly, they were also way more likely to think this split was 50-50 even when it wasn't. And this chart on childcare just makes the point crystal clear. Overwhelmingly, moms were the primary caregivers before 2020. So this existing imbalance meant that when schools and daycares suddenly closed, that extra burden fell disproportionately right onto their shoulders, which completely shaped how they were able to manage this new work-from-home world. So how did this imbalance affect their strategies? Well, fathers were often better able to create those firm, hardline boundaries, the dedicated office with a strict closed-door policy. Mothers, on the other hand, who were often facing more pressure to integrate everything, had to be more flexible. They were the ones more likely to be logging back on after putting the kids to bed, using scheduling not just to separate work and family, but to constantly juggle both roles at the same time. Okay, we've covered the problem, the mindset shifts, the practical strategies, and the gender dynamics. So what's the big takeaway here? How can we pull all these lessons together into a toolkit for not just surviving, but actually thriving in this new world of work? Here it is, your resilience toolkit, broken down into 4 key areas. You've got to master your internal game, know your priorities and be realistic. Then master your external game, control your technology and your time. After that is your physical game, create a separate space and use that door. And finally, and this might be the most important, master your social game. Communicate your boundaries clearly and work with your partner toward a truly fair division of labor. And all of this leaves us with one final crucial question. All of these strategies we've talked about were developed by individuals, by parents, under immense pressure. But as we design the future of work, the responsibility can't just be on them. The real question is, how can our companies and society as a whole learn these lessons to build a system that is inherently more flexible, more equitable, and actually supportive for working families? What does that future look like?